Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we wander back into the gentle green silence of an enchanted forest, a place where time slows, shadows soften, and old stories awaken, as if whispered by the leaves themselves. Inspired by the timeless spirit of the Green Fairy Book, these tender retellings gather tales of courage, quiet wonder, and subtle magic drawn from distant lands and forgotten ages. If this woodland of stories brings you peace, you're warmly invited to like, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. Now, breathe slowly and follow me into the deepening twilight, where every story glows softly, waiting to carry you into rest. From the Senna, Oral Tradition. Once upon a time, at the town of Senna on the banks of the Zambezi, was born a child. He was not like other children, for he was very tall and strong. Over his shoulder he carried a big sack, and in his hand an iron hammer. He could also speak like a grown man, but usually he was very silent. One day his mother said to him, "My child, by what name shall we know you?" And he answered, "Call all the head men of Senna here to the river's bank." And his mother called the head men of the town, and when they had come, he led them down to a deep black pool in the river where all the fierce crocodiles lived. "O great men," he said, while they all listened, "which of you will leap into the pool and overcome the crocodiles?" But no one would come forward, so he turned and sprang into the water and disappeared. The people held their breath, for they thought, "Surely the boy is bewitched and throws away his life, for the crocodiles will eat him." Then suddenly the ground trembled, and the pool, heaving and swirling, became red with blood, and presently the boy, rising to the surface, swam on shore. But he was no longer just a boy. He was stronger than any man and very tall and handsome, so that the people shouted with gladness when they saw him. "Now, O my people," he cried, waving his hand, "you know my name. I am Makoma, the Greater. For have I not slain the crocodiles into the pool where none would venture?" Then he said to his mother, "Rest gently, my mother, for I go to make a home for myself and become a hero." Then, entering his hut, he took Nu-Endo, his iron hammer, and throwing the sack over his shoulder, he went away. Makoma crossed the Zambezi, and for many moons he wandered towards the north and west until he came to a very hilly country where, one day, he met a huge giant making mountains. "Greeting!" shouted Makoma. "You are you?" "I am Chi Eswa Mapiri, who makes the mountains," answered the giant. "And who are you?" "I am Makoma, which signifies greater," answered he. "Greater than who?" asked the giant. "Greater than you," answered Makoma. The giant gave a roar and rushed upon him. Makoma said nothing, but swinging his great hammer, Nu-Endo, he struck the giant upon the head. He struck him so hard a blow that the giant shrank into quite a little man, who fell upon his knees, saying, "You are indeed greater than I, O Makoma. Take me with you to be your slave." So Makoma picked him up and dropped him into the sack that he carried upon his back. He was greater than ever now, for all the giant's strength had gone into him, and he resumed his journey, carrying his burden with as little difficulty as an eagle might carry a hare. Before long, he came to a country broken up with huge stones and immense clods of earth. Looking over one of the heaps, he saw a giant wrapped in dust, dragging out the very earth and hurling it in handfuls on either side of him. "Who are you?" cried Makoma, "that pulls up the earth in this way?" "I am Chi Dubula Taka," said he, "and I am making the riverbeds." "Do you know who I am?" said Makoma. "I am he that is called Greater." "Greater than who?" thundered the giant. "Greater than you," answered Makoma. With a shout, Chidubulataka seized a great clod of earth and launched it at Makoma. But the hero had his sack held over his left arm, and the stones and earth fell harmlessly upon it, and, tightly gripping his iron hammer, he rushed in and struck the giant to the ground. Chidubulataka groveled before him, all the while growing smaller and smaller, and when he had become a convenient size, Makoma picked him up and put him into the sack beside Chieswa Mapiri. He went on his way even greater than before, as all the river maker's power had become his, and at last he came to a forest of baobabs and thorn trees. He was astonished at their size, for everyone was full-grown and larger than any trees he had ever seen, and close by he saw Chiguisa Miti, the giant who was planting the forest. Chiguisa Miti was taller than either of his brothers, but Makoma was not afraid, and called out to him, "Who are you, O big one?" "I," said the giant, "am Chiguisa Miti, and I am planting these baobabs and thorns as food for my children the elephants." "Leave off," shouted the hero, "for I am Makoma, and would like to exchange a blow with thee." The giant, plucking up a monster baobab by the roots, struck heavily at Makoma, but the hero sprang aside, and as the weapon sank deep into the soft earth, whirled Nuendo the hammer round his head and felled the giant with one blow. So terrible was the stroke that Chiguisa Miti shriveled up as the other giants had done, and when he had got back his breath, he begged Makoma to take him as his servant. "For," said he, "it is honorable to serve a man so great as thou." Makoma, after placing him in his sack, proceeded upon his journey, and traveling for many days, he at last reached a country so barren and rocky that not a single living thing grew upon it. Everywhere reigned grim desolation, and in the midst of this dead region, he found a man eating fire. "What are you doing?" demanded Makoma. "I am eating fire," answered the man, laughing, "and my name is Chi-Idea-Moto, for I am the flame spirit, and can waste and destroy what I like." "You are wrong," said Makoma, "for I am Makoma, who is greater than you, and you cannot destroy me." The fire-eater laughed again, and blew a flame at Makoma, but the hero sprang behind a rock, just in time, for the ground upon which he had been standing was turned to molten glass, like an over-baked pot, by the heat of the flame spirit's breath. Then the hero flung his iron hammer at Chi-Idea-Moto, and striking him, it knocked him helpless. So Makoma placed him in the sack, Woronowu, with the other great men that he had overcome. And now, truly, Makoma was a very great hero, for he had the strength to make hills, the industry to lead rivers over dry wastes, foresight and wisdom in planting trees, and the power of producing fire when he wished. Wandering on, he arrived one day at a great plain, well watered and full of game, and in the very middle of it, close to a large river, was a grassy spot, very pleasant to make a home upon. Makoma was so delighted with the little meadow that he sat down under a large tree, and removing the sack from his shoulder, took out all the giants and set them before him. "My friends," said he, "I have traveled far and am weary. Is not this such a place as would suit a hero for his home? Let us then go, tomorrow, to bring in timber to make a kraal." So the next day Makoma and the giants set out to get poles to build the kraal, leaving only Chieswa Mapiri to look after the place and cook some venison which they had killed. In the evening, when they returned, they found the giant helpless and tied to a tree by one enormous hair. "How is it," said Makoma, astonished, "that we find you thus bound and helpless?" "O chief," answered Chieswa-Mapiri, "at midday a man came out of the river. He was of immense stature, and his gray mustaches were of such length that I could not see where they ended. He demanded of me, 'Who is thy master?' And I answered, 'Makoma, the greatest of heroes.' Then the man seized me, and pulling a hair from his mustache, tied me to this tree, even as you see me." Makoma was very wroth, but he said nothing, and drawing his fingernail across the hair, which was as thick and strong as palm rope, cut it, and set free the mountain maker. The 3 following days, exactly the same thing happened, only each time with a different one of the party. And on the 4th day, Makoma stayed in camp when the others went to cut poles, saying that he would see for himself what sort of man this was that lived in the river, and whose mustaches were so long that they extended beyond men's sight. So when the giants had gone, he swept and tidied the camp, and put some venison on the fire to roast. At midday, when the sun was right overhead, he heard a rumbling noise from the river, and looking up, he saw the head and shoulders of an enormous man emerging from it. And behold, right down the riverbed and up the riverbed, till they faded into the blue distance, stretched the giant's gray mustaches. "Who are you?" bellowed the giant as soon as he was out of the water. "I am he that is called Makoma," answered the hero. "And before I slay thee, tell me also what is thy name and what thou doest in the river." "My name is Chin-Debu-Maugiri," said the giant. "My home is in the river, for my mustache is the gray fever mist that hangs above the water, and with which I bind all those that come unto me, so that they die." "You cannot bind me," shouted Makoma, rushing upon him and striking with his hammer. But the river giant was so slimy that the blow slid harmlessly off his green chest, and as Makoma stumbled and tried to regain his balance, the giant swung one of his long hairs around him and tripped him up. For a moment Makoma was helpless, but remembering the power of the flame spirit which had entered into him, he breathed a fiery breath upon the giant's hair and cut himself free. As Chin-Debu-Maugiri leaned forward to seize him, the hero flung his sack Woronovu over the giant's slippery head, and gripping his iron hammer, struck him again. This time the blow alighted upon the dry sack, and Chin-Debu-Maugiri fell dead. When the 4 giants returned at sunset with the poles, they rejoiced to find that Makoma had overcome the fever spirit, and they feasted on the roast venison till far into the night. But in the morning, when they awoke, Makoma was already warming his hands to the fire, and his face was gloomy. "In the darkness of the night, O my friends," he said presently, "the white spirits of my fathers came upon me and spoke, saying, 'Get thee hence, Makoma, for thou shalt have no rest until thou hast found and fought with Sakatirina, who had 5 heads, and is very great and strong, so take leave of thy friends, for thou must go alone.'" Then the giants were very sad, and bewailed the loss of their hero, but Makoma comforted them, and gave back to each the gifts he had taken from them. Then bidding them farewell, he went on his way. Makoma traveled far towards the west, over rough mountains and waterlogged morasses, fording deep rivers, and tramping for days across dry deserts where most men would have died, until at length he arrived at a hut standing near some large peaks, and inside the hut were 2 beautiful women. "Greeting," said the hero. Is this the country of Sakatarina of 5 heads, whom I am seeking?" "We greet you, O Great One," answered the women. "We are the wives of Sakatarina. Your search is at an end, for there stands he whom you seek." And they pointed to what Makoma had thought were 2 tall mountain peaks. "Those are his legs," they said. "His body you cannot see, for it is hidden in the clouds." Makoma was astonished when he beheld how tall was the giant. But, nothing daunted, he went forward until he reached one of Sakatarina's legs, which he struck heavily with new endo. Nothing happened, so he hit again and then again, until presently he heard a tired, far-away voice saying, "Who is it that scratches my feet?" And Makoma shouted as loud as he could, answering, "It is I, Makoma, who is called Greater." And he listened, but there was no answer. Then Makoma collected all the dead brushwood and trees that he could find, and making an enormous pile round the giant's legs, set a light to it. This time the giant spoke. His voice was very terrible, for it was the rumble of thunder in the clouds. "Who is it?" he said, "making that fire smolder around my feet?" "It is I, Makoma," shouted the hero. "And I have come from far away to see thee, O Sakatarina, for the spirits of my fathers bade me go seek and fight with thee, lest I should grow fat and weary of myself." There was silence for a while, and then the giant spoke softly. "It is good, O Makoma," he said, "for I too have grown weary. There is no man so great as I, therefore I am all alone. Guard thyself." And bending suddenly, he seized the hero in his hands and dashed him upon the ground. And lo, instead of death, Makoma had found life, for he sprang to his feet mightier in strength and stature than before, and rushing in, he gripped the giant by the waist and wrestled with him. Hour by hour they fought, and mountains rolled beneath their feet like pebbles in a flood. Now Makoma would break away, and summoning up his strength, strike the giant with new endo his iron hammer, and Sakatarina would pluck up the mountains and hurl them upon the hero. But neither one could slay the other. At last, upon the 2nd day, they grappled so strongly that they could not break away. But their strength was failing, and just as the sun was sinking, they fell together to the ground, insensible. In the morning when they awoke, Mulimo the Great Spirit was standing by them, and he said, "O Makoma and Sakatarina, ye are heroes so great that no man may come against you. Therefore ye will leave the world and take up your home with me in the clouds." And as he spake, the heroes became invisible to the people of the earth, and were no more seen among them. Lie, and follow me into the deepening twilight, where every story glows softly, waiting to carry you into rest. The Magic Mirror, Native Rhodesian Tale. From the Senna. A long, long while ago, before ever the white men were seen in Senna, there lived a man called Gopani Kufa. One day, as he was out hunting, he came upon a strange sight. An enormous python had caught an antelope and coiled itself around it. The antelope, striking out in despair with its horns, had pinned the python's neck to a tree, and so deeply had its horns sunk in the soft wood that neither creature could get away. "Help!" cried the antelope, "for I was doing no harm, yet I have been caught, and would have been eaten had I not defended myself." "Help me," said the python, "for I am Insato, king of all the reptiles, and will reward you well." Gopani Kufa considered for a moment, then stabbing the antelope with his assegai, he set the python free. "I thank you," said the python. "Come back here with the new moon, when I shall have eaten the antelope, and I will reward you as I promised." "Yes," said the dying antelope, "he will reward you, and lo, your reward shall be your own undoing." Gopani Kufa went back to his kraal, and with the new moon he returned again to the spot where he had saved the python. Insato was lying upon the ground, still sleepy from the effects of his huge meal, and when he saw the man he thanked him again and said, "Come with me now to Pita, which is my own country, and I will give you what you will of all my possessions." Gopani Kufa at first was afraid, thinking of what the antelope had said, but finally he consented and followed Insato into the forest. For several days they traveled, and at last they came to a hole leading deep into the earth. It was not very wide, but large enough to admit a man. "Hold on to my tail," said Insato, "and I will go down first, drawing you after me." The man did so, and Insato entered. Down, down, down they went for days, all the while getting deeper and deeper into the earth, until at last the darkness ended and they dropped into a beautiful country. Around them grew short green grass, on which browsed herds of cattle and sheep and goats. In the distance, Gopani Kufa saw a great collection of houses, all square, built of stone and very tall, and their roofs were shining with gold and burnished iron. Gopani Kufa turned to Insato, but found in the place of the python a man, strong and handsome, with the great snake's skin wrapped round him for covering, and on his arms and neck were rings of pure gold. The man smiled. "I am Insato," said he, "but in my own country I take man's shape, even as you see me, for this is Pita, the land over which I am king." He then took Gopani Kufa by the hand and led him towards the town. On the way they passed rivers in which men and women were bathing and fishing and boating. And farther on they came to gardens covered with heavy crops of rice and maize, and many other grains which Gopani Kufa did not even know the name of. And as they passed, the people who were singing at their work in the fields abandoned their labors and saluted Insato with delight, bringing also palm wine and green coconuts for refreshment, as to one returned from a long journey. "These are my children," said Insato, waving his hand towards the people. Gopani Kufa was much astonished at all that he saw, but he said nothing. Presently they came to the town. Everything here, too, was beautiful, and everything that a man might desire he could obtain. Even the grains of dust in the streets were of gold and silver. Insato conducted Gopani Kufa to the palace, and showing him his rooms and the maidens who would wait upon him, told him that they would have a great feast that night, and on the morrow he might name his choice of the riches of Pita, and it should be given him. Then he was away. Now Gopani Kufa had a wasp called Zengi Mizi. Zengi Mizi was not an ordinary wasp, for the spirit of the father of Gopani Kufa had entered it, so that it was exceedingly wise. In times of doubt, Gopani Kufa always consulted the wasp as to what had better be done, so on this occasion he took it out of the little rush basket in which he carried it, saying, "Zengi Mizi, what gift shall I ask of Insato tomorrow, when he would know the reward he shall bestow on me for saving his life?" "Biz-zuz," hummed Zengi Mizi, "ask him for Sipao the mirror." And it flew back into its basket. Gopani Kufa was astonished at this answer, but knowing that the words of Zengi Mizi were true words, he determined to make the request. So that night they feasted, and on the morrow Insato came to Gopani Kufa, and giving him greeting joyfully, he said, "Now, O my friend, name your choice amongst my possessions, and you shall have it." "O king," answered Gopani Kufa, "out of all your possessions I will have the mirror Sipao." The king started. "O friend Gopani Kufa," he said, "ask anything but that. I did not think that you would request that which is most precious to me." "Let me think over it again then, O king," said Gopani Kufa, "and tomorrow I will let you know if I change my mind." But the king was still much troubled, fearing the loss of Sipao, for the mirror had magic powers, so that he who owned it had but to ask, and his wish would be fulfilled. To it Insato owed all that he possessed. As soon as the king left him, Gopani Kufa again took Zengimizi out of his basket. "Zengimizi," he said, "the king seems loth to grant my request for the mirror. Is there not some other thing of equal value for which I might ask?" And the wasp answered, "There is nothing in the world, O Gopani Kufa, which is of such value as this mirror, for it is a wishing mirror and accomplishes the desires of him who owns it. If the king hesitates, go to him the next day and the day after, and in the end he will bestow the mirror upon you, for you saved his life." And it was even so. For 3 days Gopani Kufa returned the same answer to the king, and, at last, with tears in his eyes, Insato gave him the mirror, which was of polished iron, saying, "Take Sipao then, O Gopani Kufa, and may thy wishes come true. Go back now to thine own country. Sipao will show you the way." Gopani Kufa was greatly rejoiced, and taking farewell of the king, said to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I wish to be back upon the earth again." Instantly he found himself standing upon the upper earth, but not knowing the spot, he said again to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I want the path to my own kraal." And behold, right before him lay the path. When he arrived home, he found his wife and daughter mourning for him, for they thought that he had been eaten by lions. But he comforted them, saying that while following a wounded antelope, he had missed his way and had wandered for a long time before he had found the path again. That night he asked Zengimizi, in whom sat the spirit of his father, what he had better ask Sipao for next. "Bizziz," said the wasp, "would you not like to be as great a chief as Insato?" And Gopani Kufa smiled, and took the mirror and said to it, "Sipao, Sipao, I want a town as great as that of Insato, the king of Pita, and I wish to be chief over it." Then all along the banks of the Zambezi River, which flowed nearby, sprang up streets of stone buildings, and their roofs shone with gold and burnished iron like those in Pita. And in the streets men and women were walking, and young boys were driving out the sheep and cattle to pasture. And from the river came shouts and laughter from the young men and maidens who had launched their canoes and were fishing. And when the people of the new town beheld Gopani Kufa, they rejoiced greatly and hailed him as chief. Gopani Kufa was now as powerful as Insato, the king of the reptiles, had been, and he and his family moved into the palace that stood high above the other buildings, right in the middle of the town. His wife was too astonished at all these wonders to ask any questions, but his daughter Shasasa kept begging him to tell her how he had suddenly become so great. So at last he revealed the whole secret, and even entrusted Sipao the mirror to her care, saying, "It will be safer with you, my daughter, for you dwell apart, whereas men come to consult me on affairs of state, and the mirror might be stolen." Then Shasasa took the magic mirror and hid it beneath her pillow. And after that, for many years, Gopani Kufa ruled his people both well and wisely, so that all men loved him, and never once did he need to ask Sipao to grant him a wish. Now it happened that, after many years, when the hair of Gopani Kufa was turning gray with age, there came white men to that country. Up the Zambesi they came, and they fought long and fiercely with Gopani Kufa. But because of the power of the magic mirror, he beat them, and they fled to the sea-coast. Chief among them was one Ray, a man of much cunning, who sought to discover whence sprang Gopani Kufa's power. So one day he called to him a trusty servant named Butu, and said, "Go you to the town and find out for me what is the secret of its greatness." And Butu, dressing himself in rags, set out. And when he came to Gopani Kufa's town, he asked for the chief, and the people took him into the presence of Gopani Kufa. When the white man saw him, he humbled himself and said, "O chief, take pity on me, for I have no home. When Ray marched against you, I alone stood apart, for I knew that all the strength of the Zambesi lay in your hands. And because I would not fight against you, he turned me forth into the forest to starve." And Gopani Kufa believed the white man's story, and he took him in and feasted him, and gave him a house. In this way the end came. For the heart of Shasasa, the daughter of Gopani Kufa, went forth to Butu the trader, and from her he learnt the secret of the magic mirror. One night, when all the town slept, he felt beneath her pillow, and finding the mirror, he stole it and fled back with it to Ray, the chief of the white men. So it befell that one day, as Gopani Kufa was gazing up at the river from a window of the palace, he again saw the war canoes of the white men, and at the sight his spirit misgave him. "Shasasa, my daughter," he cried wildly, "go fetch me the mirror, for the white men are at hand." "Woe is me, my father," she sobbed. "The mirror is gone, for I loved Butu the traitor, and he has stolen Sipao from me." Then Gopani Kufa calmed himself and drew out Zengimizi from its rush basket. "O spirit of my father," he said, "what now shall I do?" "O Gopani Kufa," hummed the wasp, "there is nothing now that can be done, for the words of the antelope which you slew are being fulfilled." "Alas, I am an old man. I had forgotten," cried the chief. "The words of the antelope were true words. My reward shall be my undoing. They are being fulfilled." Then the white men fell upon the people of Gopani Kufa and slew them together with the chief and his daughter Shasasa. And since then all the power of the earth has rested in the hands of the white men, for they have in their possession Sipao, the magic mirror. Story of the king who would see paradise. Once upon a time, there was king who, one day out hunting, came upon a fakir in a lonely place in the mountains. The fakir was seated on a little old bedstead, reading the Quran, with his patched cloak thrown over his shoulders. The king asked him what he was reading, and he said he was reading about paradise and praying that he might be worthy to enter there. Then they began to talk, and by, the king asked the fakir if he could show him a glimpse of paradise, for he found it very difficult to believe in what he could not see. The fakir replied that he was asking a very difficult and perhaps a very dangerous thing, but that he would pray for him, and perhaps he might be able to do it. Only he warned the king both against the dangers of his unbelief and against the curiosity which prompted him to ask this thing. However, the king was not to be turned from his purpose, and he promised the fakir always to provide him with food, if he, in return, would pray for him. To this the fakir agreed, and so they parted. Time went on, and the king always sent the old fakir his food according to his promise. But whenever he sent to ask him when he was going to show him paradise, the fakir always replied, "Not yet, not yet." After a year or two had passed by, the king heard one day that the fakir was very ill. Indeed, he was believed to be dying. Instantly, he hurried off himself and found that it was really true, and that the fakir was even then breathing his last. There and then, the king besought him to remember his promise and to show him a glimpse of paradise. The dying fakir replied that if the king would come to his funeral, and when the grave was filled in and everyone else was gone away, he would come and lay his hand upon the grave, he would keep his word and show him a glimpse of paradise. At the same time, he implored the king not to do this thing, but to be content to see paradise when God called him there. Still, the king's curiosity was so aroused that he would not give way. Accordingly, after the fakir was dead and had been buried, he stayed behind when all the rest went away. And then, when he was quite alone, he stepped forward and laid his hand upon the grave. Instantly the ground opened, and the astonished king, peeping in, saw a flight of rough steps, and, at the bottom of them, the fakir sitting just as he used to sit on his rickety bedstead, reading the Quran. At first the king was so surprised and frightened that he could only stare. But the fakir beckoned to him to come down. So, mustering up his courage, he boldly stepped down into the grave. The fakir rose, and making a sign to the king to follow, walked a few paces along a dark passage. Then he stopped, turned solemnly to his companion, and with a movement of his hand, drew aside as it were a heavy curtain, and revealed, "What? No one knows what was there shown to the king, nor did he ever tell anyone." But when the fakir at length dropped the curtain, and the king turned to leave the place, he had had his glimpse of paradise. Trembling in every limb, he staggered back along the passage and stumbled up the steps out of the tomb into the fresh air again. The dawn was breaking. It seemed odd to the king that he had been so long in the grave. It appeared but a few minutes ago that he had descended, passed along a few steps to the place where he had peeped beyond the veil, and returned again after perhaps 5 minutes of that wonderful view. And what was it he had seen? He racked his brains to remember, but he could not call to mind a single thing. How curious everything looked too. Why, his own city, which by now he was entering, seemed changed and strange to him. The sun was already up when he turned into the palace gate and entered the public Durbar Hall. It was full. A chamberlain came across and asked him why he sat unbidden in the king's presence. "But I am the king," he cried. "What king?" said the chamberlain. "The true king of this country," said he indignantly. Then the chamberlain went away and spoke to the king who sat on the throne. And the old king heard words like mad, age, compassion. Then the king on the throne called him to come forward, and as he went, he caught sight of himself reflected in the polished steel shield of the bodyguard, and started back in horror. He was old, decrepit, dirty, and ragged. His long white beard and locks were unkempt and straggled all over his chest and shoulders. Only one sign of royalty remained to him, and that was the signet ring upon his right hand. He dragged it off with shaking fingers and held it up to the king. "Tell me who I am," he cried. "There is my signet, who once sat where you sit, even yesterday." The king looked at him compassionately and examined the signet with curiosity. Then he commanded, and they brought out dusty records and archives of the kingdom and old coins of previous reigns, and compared them faithfully. At last the king turned to the old man and said, "Old man, such a king as this whose signet thou hast reigned 700 years ago, but he is said to have disappeared, none know whither. Where got you the ring?" Then the old man smote his breast and cried out with a loud lamentation, for he understood that he, who was not content to wait patiently to see the paradise of the faithful, had been judged already. And he turned and left the hall without a whir, and went into the jungle, where he lived for 25 years, a life of prayer and meditation, until at last the angel of death came to him, and mercifully released him, purged and purified through his punishment. Ian, the soldier's son, Makoma story. There dwelt a knight in Grianeg of the land of the west, who had 3 daughters, and for goodness and beauty they had not their like in all the isles. All the people loved them, and loud was the weeping when one day, as the 3 maidens sat on the rocks on the edge of the sea, dipping their feet in the water, there arose a great beast from under the waves and swept them away beneath the ocean, and none knew whither they had gone or how to seek them. Now there lived in a town a few miles off a soldier who had 3 sons, fine youths and strong, and the best players at shinny in that country. At Christmas tide that year, when families met together and great feasts were held, Ian, the youngest of the 3 brothers, said, "Let us have a match at shinny on the lawn of the knight of Grianeg, for his lawn is wider and the grass smoother than ours." But the others answered, "Nay, for he is in sorrow, and he will think of the games that we have played there when his daughters looked on." "Let him be pleased or angry as he will," said Ian. "We will drive our ball on his lawn today." And so it was done, and Ian won 3 games from his brothers. But the knight looked out of his window and was wroth, and bade his men bring the youths before him. When he stood in his hall and beheld them, his heart was softened somewhat, but his face was angry as he asked, "Why did you choose to play shinny in front of my castle, when you knew full well that the remembrance of my daughters would come back to me? The pain which you have made me suffer, you shall suffer also." "Since we have done you wrong," answered Ian, the youngest, "build us a ship, and we will go and seek your daughters. Let them be to windward or to leeward, or under the 4 brown boundaries of the sea. We will find them before a year and a day goes by, and will carry them back to Grianeg." In 7 days the ship was built, and great store of food and wine placed in her. And the 3 brothers put her head to the sea and sailed away. And in 7 days the ship ran herself onto a beach of white sand, and they all went ashore. They had none of them ever seen that land before, and looked about them. Then they saw that a short way from them a number of men were working on a rock, with one man standing over them. "What place is this?" asked the eldest brother. And the man who was standing by made answer, "This is the place where dwell the 3 daughters of the knight of Grianeg, who are to be wedded tomorrow to 3 giants." "How can we find them?" asked the young man again. And the overlooker answered, "To reach the daughters of the knight of Grianeg, you must get into this basket and be drawn by a rope up the face of this rock." "Oh, that is easily done," said the eldest brother, jumping into the basket, which at once began to move, up and up and up, till he had gone about halfway, when a fat black raven flew at him and pecked him till he was nearly blind, so that he was forced to go back the way he had come. After that, the second brother got into the creel, but he fared no better, for the raven flew upon him, and he returned as his brother had done. "Now it is my turn," said Ian. But when he was halfway up, the raven set upon him also. "Quick, quick!" cried Ian to the men who held the rope. "Quick, quick, or I shall be blinded." And the men pulled with all their might, and in another moment Ian was on top, and the raven behind him. "Will you give me a piece of tobacco?" asked the raven, who was now quite quiet. "You rascal, am I to give you tobacco for trying to peck my eyes out?" answered Ian. "That was part of my duty," replied the raven, "but give it to me, and I will prove a good friend to you." So Ian broke off a piece of tobacco and gave it to him. The raven hid it under his wing and then went on. "Now I will take you to the house of the big giant, where the knight's daughter sits sewing, till even her thimble is wet with tears." And the raven hopped before him till they reached a large house, the door of which stood open. They entered and passed through one hall after the other, until they found the knight's daughter, as the bird had said. "What brought you here?" asked she, and Ian made answer, "Why may I not go where you can go?" "I was brought hither by a giant," replied she. "I know that," said Ian, "but tell me where the giant is, that I may find him." "He is on the hunting hill," answered she, "and naught will bring him home save a shake of the iron chain which hangs outside the gate. But there, neither to leeward nor to windward, nor in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea, is there any man that can hold battle against him, save only Ian, the soldier's son, and he is now but 16 years old. And how shall he stand against the giant? In the land whence I have come, there are many men with the strength of Ian," answered he. And he went outside and pulled at the chain, but he could not move it, and fell onto his knees. At that he rose swiftly, and gathering up his strength, he seized the chain, and this time he shook it so that the link broke. And the giant heard it on the hunting hill, and lifted his head, thinking, "It sounds like the noise of Ian, the soldier's son," said he, "but as yet he is only 16 years old. Still, I had better look to it." And home he came. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" he asked as he entered the castle. "No, of a surety," answered the youth, who had no wish that they should know him. "Then who are you in the leeward, or in the windward, or in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea, who are able to move my battle chain?" "That will be plain to you after wrestling with me as I wrestle with my mother. And one time she got the better of me, and 2 times she did not." So they wrestled, and twisted and strove with each other, till the giant forced Ian to his knee. "You are the stronger," said Ian, and the giant answered, "All men know that." And they took hold of each other once more, and at last Ian threw the giant, and wished that the raven were there to help him. No sooner had he wished his wish than the raven came. "Put your hand under my right wing, and you will find a knife sharp enough to take off his head," said the raven. And the knife was so sharp that it cut off the giant's head with a blow. "Now go and tell the daughter of the king of Grianeg, but take heed lest you listen to her words, and promise to go no further, for she will seek to help you. Instead, seek the middle daughter, and when you have found her, you shall give me a piece of tobacco for reward." "Well, have you earned the half of all I have?" answered Ian. But the raven shook his head. "You know only what has passed, and nothing of what lies before. If you would not fail, wash yourself in clean water, and take balsam from a vessel on top of the door, and rub it over your body. And tomorrow you will be as strong as many men, and I will lead you to the dwelling of the middle one." Ian did as the raven bade him, and in spite of the eldest daughter's entreaties, he set out to seek her next sister. He found her where she was seated sewing, her very thimble wet from the tears which she had shed. "What brought you here?" asked the second sister. "Why may I not go where you can go?" answered he. "And why are you weeping?" "Because in one day I shall be married to the giant who is on the hunting hill." "How can I get him home?" asked Ian. "Naught will bring him but a shake of that iron chain which hangs outside the gate. But there is neither to leeward nor to westward, nor in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea, any man that can hold battle with him, save Ian, the soldier's son, and he is now but 16 years of age. In the land whence I have come, there are many men with the strength of Ian," said he. And he went outside and pulled at the chain, but he could not move it, and fell on his knees. At that he rose to his feet, and gathering up his strength mightily, he seized the chain, and this time he shook it so that 3 links broke. And the second giant heard it on the hunting hill, and lifted his head, thinking, "It sounds like the noise of Ian, the soldier's son," said he. "But as yet he is only 16 years old. Still, I had better look to it." And home he came. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" he asked as he entered the castle. "No, of a surety," answered the youth, who had no wish that this giant should know him either. "But I will wrestle with you as if I were he." Then they seized each other by the shoulder, and the giant threw him on his 2 knees. "You are the stronger," cried Ian, "but I am not beaten yet." And rising to his feet, he threw his arms round the giant. Backwards and forwards they swayed, and first one was uppermost and then the other. But at length Ian worked his leg round the giant's and threw him to the ground. Then he called to the raven, and the raven came flapping towards him, and said, "Put your hand under my right wing, and you will find there a knife sharp enough to take off his head." And sharp indeed it was, for with a single blow the giant's head rolled from his body. "Now wash yourself with warm water, and rub yourself over with oil of balsam, and tomorrow you will be as strong as many men. But beware of the words of the knight's daughter, for she is cunning, and will try to keep you at her side. So farewell, but first give me a piece of tobacco." "That I will gladly," answered Ian, breaking off a large bit. He washed and rubbed himself that night, as the raven had told him, and the next morning he entered the chamber where the knight's daughter was sitting. "Abide here with me," she said, "and be my husband. There is silver and gold in plenty in the castle." But he took no heed, and went on his way till he reached the castle where the knight's youngest daughter was sewing in the hall, and tears dropped from her eyes onto her thimble. "What brought you here?" asked she, and Ian made answer, "Why may I not go where you can go? I was brought hither by a giant." "I know full well," said he. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" asked she again, and again he answered, "Yes, I am. But tell me, why are you weeping?" "Tomorrow the giant will return from the hunting hill, and I must marry him," she sobbed. And Ian took no heed, and only said, "How can I bring him home?" "Shake the iron chain that hangs outside the gate." And Ian went out, and gave such a pull to the chain that he fell down at full length from the force of the shake. But in a moment he was on his feet again, and seized the chain with so much strength that 4 links came off in his hand. And the giant heard him in the hunting hill, as he was putting the game he had killed into a bag. In the leeward, or the windward, or in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea, there is none who could give my chain a shake, save only Ian, the soldier's son. And if he has reached me, then he has left my 2 brothers dead behind him." With that he strode back to the castle, the earth trembling under him as he went. "Are you Ian, the soldier's son?" asked he, and the youth answered, "No, of a surety." "Then who are you in the leeward, or the windward, or in the 4 brown boundaries of the sea, who are able to shake my battle chain? There is only Ian, the soldier's son, who can do this, and he is but now 16 years old." "I will show you who I am when you have wrestled with me," said Ian. And they threw their arms round each other, and the giant forced Ian onto his knees. But in a moment he was up again, and crooking his leg round the shoulders of the giant, he threw him heavily to the ground. "Stumpy black raven, come quick!" cried he, and the raven came and beat the giant about the head with his wings, so that he could not get up. Then he bade Ian take out a sharp knife from under his feathers, which he carried with him for cutting berries, and Ian smote off the giant's head with it. And so sharp was that knife that, with one blow, the giant's head rolled on the ground. "Rest now this night also," said the raven, "and tomorrow you shall take the knight's 3 daughters to the edge of the rock that leads to the lower world. But take heed to go down first yourself, and let them follow after you. And before I go, you shall give me a piece of tobacco." "Take it all," answered Ian, "for well have you earned it." "No, give me but a piece. You know what is behind you, but you have no knowledge of what is before you." And picking up the tobacco in his beak, the raven flew away. So the next morning the knight's youngest daughter loaded asses with all the silver and gold to be found in the castle, and she set out with Ian, the soldier's son, for the house, where her second sister was waiting to see what would befall. She also had asses laden with precious things to carry away, and so had the eldest sister, when they reached the castle where she had been kept a prisoner. Together they all rode to the edge of the rock, and then Ian lay down and shouted, and the basket was drawn up, and in it they got one by one, and were let down to the bottom. When the last one was gone, Ian should have gone also, and left the 3 sisters to come after him. But he had forgotten the raven's warning, and bade them go first, lest some accident should happen. Only he begged the youngest sister to let him keep the little gold cap, which, like the others, she wore on her head. And then he helped them, each in her turn, into the basket. Long he waited, but wait as he might, the basket never came back, for in their joy at being free, the knight's daughters had forgotten all about Ian, and had set sail in the ship that had brought him and his brothers to the land of Grianeg. At last he began to understand what had happened to him, and while he was taking counsel with himself what had best be done, the raven came to him. "You did not heed my words," he said gravely. "No, I did not, and therefore am I here," answered Ian, bowing his head. "The past cannot be undone," went on the raven. "He that will not take counsel will take combat. This night you will sleep in the giant's castle, and now you shall give me a piece of tobacco." "I will, but I pray you, stay in the castle with me." "That I may not do, but on the morrow I will come." And on the morrow he did, and he bade Ian go to the giant's stable, where stood a horse to whom it mattered nothing if she journeyed over land or sea. "But be careful," he added, "how you enter the stable, for the door swings without ceasing to and fro, and if it touches you, it will cause you to cry out, 'I will go first and show you the way.'" "Go," said Ian. And the raven gave a bob and a hop, and thought he was quite safe, but the door slammed on a feather of his tail, and he screamed loudly. Then Ian took a run backwards and a run forwards, and made a spring, but the door caught one of his feet, and he fell fainting on the stable floor. Quickly the raven pounced on him, and picked him up in his beak and claws, and carried him back to the castle, where he laid ointments on his foot, till it was as well as ever it was. "Now come out to walk," said the raven, "but take heed that you wonder not at aught you may behold, neither shall you touch anything, and first give me a piece of tobacco." Many strange things did Ian behold in that island, more than he had thought for. In a glen lay 3 heroes stretched on their backs, done to death by 3 spears that still stuck in their breasts. But he kept his counsel and spake nothing, only he pulled out the spears, and the men sat up and said, "You are Ian the soldier's son, and a spell is laid upon you to travel in our company to the cave of the black fisherman." So together they went till they reached the cave, and one of the men entered to see what should be found there. And he beheld a hag, horrible to look upon, seated on a rock, and before he could speak, she struck him with her club, and changed him into a stone, and in like manner she dealt with the other 3. At the last Ian entered. "These men are under spells," said the witch, "and alive they can never be till you have anointed them with the water which you must fetch from the island of big women. See that you do not tarry." And Ian turned away with a sinking heart, for he would fain have followed the youngest daughter of the knight of Grianeg. "You did not obey my counsel," said the raven, hopping towards him, "and so trouble has come upon you, but sleep now, and tomorrow you shall mount the horse which is in the giant's stable, that can gallop over sea and land. When you reach the island of big women, 16 boys will come to meet you, and will offer the horse food, and wish to take her saddle and bridle from her. But see that they touch her not, and give her food yourself, and yourself lead her into the stable, and shut the door. And be sure that for every turn of the lock given by the 16 stable lads you give one. And now you shall break me off a piece of tobacco." The next morning Ian arose, and led the horse from the stable, without the door hurting him, and he rode across the sea to the island of the big women, where the 16 stable lads met him, and each one offered to take his horse, and to feed her, and to put her into the stable. But Ian only answered, "I myself will put her in, and will see to her." And thus he did. And while he was rubbing her sides, the horse said to him, "Every kind of drink will they offer you, but see you take none, save whey and water only." And so it fell out. And when the 16 stable boys saw that he would drink nothing, they drank it all themselves, and one by one lay stretched around the board. Then Ian felt pleased in his heart that he had withstood their fair words, and he forgot the counsel that the horse had likewise given him, saying, "Beware lest you fall asleep, and let slip the chance of getting home again." For while the lads were sleeping, sweet music reached his ears, and he slept also. When this came to pass, the steed broke through the stable door, and kicked him, and woke him roughly. "You did not heed my counsel," said she, "and who knows if it is not too late to win over the sea? But first take that sword which hangs on the wall, and cut off the heads of the 16 grooms." Filled with shame at being once more proved heedless, Ian arose and did as the horse bade him. Then he ran to the well and poured some of the water into a leather bottle, and jumping on the horse's back, rode over the sea to the island where the raven was waiting for him. "Lead the horse into the stable," said the raven, "and lie down yourself to sleep, for tomorrow you must make the heroes to live again, and must slay the hag. And have a care not to be so foolish tomorrow as you were today." "Stay with me for company," begged Ian. But the raven shook his head and flew away. In the morning Ian awoke and hastened to the cave where the old hag was sitting, and he struck her dead as she was, before she could cast spells on him. Next he sprinkled the water over the heroes, who came to life again, and together they all journeyed to the other side of the island, and there the raven met them. "At last you have followed the counsel that was given you," said the raven, "and now, having learned wisdom, you may go home again to Grianag. There you will find that the knight's 2 eldest daughters are to be wedded this day to your 2 brothers, and the youngest to the chief of the men at the rock. But her gold cap you shall give to me, and if you want it, you have only to think of me, and I will bring it to you. And one more warning I give you. If anyone asks you whence you came, answer that you have come from behind you. And if anyone asks you whither you are going, say that you are going before you." So Ian mounted the horse and set her face to the sea and her back to the shore. And she was off, away and away, till she reached the church of Grianaig. And there, in a field of grass, beside a well of water, he leaped down from his saddle. "Now," the horse said to him, "draw your sword and cut off my head." But Ian answered, "Poor thanks would that be for all the help I have had from you. It is the only way that I can free myself from the spells that were laid by the giants on me and the raven. For I was a girl, and he was a youth wooing me. So have no fears, but do as I have said." Then Ian drew his sword as she bade him, and cut off her head, and went on his way without looking backwards. As he walked, he saw a woman standing at her house door. She asked him whence he had come, and he answered as the raven had told him, that he came from behind. Next, she inquired whither he was going, and this time he made reply that he was going on before him, but that he was thirsty, and would like a drink. "You are an impudent fellow," said the woman, "but you shall have a drink." And she gave him some milk, which was all she had till her husband came home. "Where is your husband?" asked Ian, and the woman answered him, "He is at the knight's castle trying to fashion gold and silver into a cap for the youngest daughter, like unto the caps that her sisters wear, such as are not to be found in all this land. But see, he is returning, and now we shall hear how he has sped." At that the man entered the gate, and beholding a strange youth, he said to him, "What is your trade, boy?" "I am a smith," replied Ian. And the man answered, "Good luck has befallen me then, for you can help me to make a cap for the knight's daughter." "You cannot make that cap, and you know it," said Ian. "Well, I must try," replied the man, "or I shall be hanged on a tree, so it were a good deed to help me." "I will help you if I can," said Ian, "but keep the gold and silver for yourself, and lock me into the smithy tonight, and I will work my spells." So the man, wondering to himself, locked him in. As soon as the key was turned in the lock, Ian wished for the raven, and the raven came to him, carrying the cap in his mouth. "Now take my head off," said the raven. But Ian answered, "Poor thanks were that for all the help you have given me." "It is the only thanks you can give me," said the raven, "for I was a youth like yourself before spells were laid on me." Then Ian drew his sword and cut off the head of the raven and shut his eyes so that he might see nothing. After that he lay down and slept till morning dawned, and the man came and unlocked the door and shook the sleeper. "Here is the cap," said Ian drowsily, drawing it from under his pillow, and he fell asleep again directly. The sun was high in the heavens when he woke again, and this time he beheld a tall, brown-haired youth standing by him. "I am the raven," said the youth, "and the spells are broken, but now get up and come with me." Then they two went together to the place where Ian had left the dead horse. But no horse was there now, only a beautiful maiden. "I am the horse," she said, "and the spells are broken." And she and the youth went away together. In the meantime, the smith had carried the cap to the castle and bade a servant belonging to the knight's youngest daughter bear it to her mistress. But when the girl's eyes fell on it, she cried out, "He speaks false, and if he does not bring me the man who really made the cap, I will hang him on the tree beside my window." The servant was filled with fear at her words, and hastened and told the smith, who ran as fast as he could to seek for Ian. And when he found him and brought him into the castle, the girl was first struck dumb with joy. Then she declared that she would marry nobody else. At this, someone fetched to her the Knight of Grianeg, and when Ian had told his tale, he vowed that the maiden was right, and that his elder daughters should never wed with men who had not only taken glory to themselves, which did not belong to them, but had left the real doer of the deeds to his fate. And the wedding guests said that the knight had spoken well, and the two elder brothers were fain to leave the country, for no one would converse with them. The Fox and the Wolf, from Tales of the West Highlands. At the foot of some high mountains there was, once upon a time, a small village, and a little way off two roads met, one of them going to the east and the other to the west. The villagers were quiet, hard-working folk, who toiled in the fields all day, and in the evening set out for home, when the bell began to ring in the little church. In the summer mornings they led out their flocks to pasture, and were happy and contented from sunrise to sunset. One summer night, when a round full moon shone down upon the white road, a great wolf came trotting round the corner. "I positively must get a good meal before I go back to my den," he said to himself. "It is nearly a week since I have tasted anything but scraps, though perhaps no one would think it to look at my figure. Of course, there are plenty of rabbits and hares in the mountains, but indeed one needs to be a greyhound to catch them, and I am not so young as I was. If I could only dine off that fox I saw a fortnight ago, curled up into a delicious hairy ball, I should ask nothing better. I would have eaten her then, but unluckily her husband was lying beside her, and one knows that foxes, great and small, run like the wind. Really, it seems as if there was not a living creature left for me to prey upon, but a wolf. And as the proverb says, one wolf does not bite another. However, let us see what this village can produce. I am as hungry as a schoolmaster." Now, while these thoughts were running through the mind of the wolf, the very fox he had been thinking of was galloping along the other road. "The whole of this day I have listened to those village hens clucking till I could bear it no longer," murmured she as she bounded along, hardly seeming to touch the ground. "When you are fond of fowls and eggs, it is the sweetest of all music. As sure as there is a sun in heaven, I will have some of them this night, for I have grown so thin that my very bones rattle, and my poor babies are crying for food." And as she spoke, she reached a little plot of grass where the two roads joined, and flung herself under a tree to take a little rest and to settle her plans. At this moment, the wolf came up. At the sight of the fox lying within his grasp, his mouth began to water, but his joy was somewhat checked when he noticed how thin she was. The fox's quick ears heard the sound of his paws, though they were soft as velvet, and turning her head, she said politely, "Is that you, neighbor? What a strange place to meet in. I hope you are quite well." "Quite well as regards my health," answered the wolf, whose eye glistened greedily. "At least, as well as one can be when one is very hungry. But what is the matter with you? A fortnight ago you were as plump as heart could wish." "I have been ill, very ill," replied the fox, "and what you say is quite true. A worm is fat in comparison with me." "He is. Still, you are good enough for me, for, to the hungry, no bread is hard." "Oh, you are always joking. I'm sure you are not half as hungry as I." "That we shall soon see," cried the wolf, opening his huge mouth and crouching for a spring. "What are you doing?" exclaimed the fox, stepping backwards. "What am I doing? What I am going to do is to make my supper off you, in less time than a cock takes to crow." "Well, I suppose you must have your joke," answered the fox lightly, but never removing her eye from the wolf, who replied with a snarl which showed all his teeth, "I don't want to joke, but to eat. But surely a person of your talents must perceive that you might eat me to the very last morsel, and never know that you had swallowed anything at all. In this world, the cleverest people are always the hungriest," replied the wolf. "Ah, how true that is, but—" "I can't stop to listen to your buts and yets," broke in the wolf rudely. "Let us get to the point. And the point is that I want to eat you and not talk to you." "Have you no pity for a poor mother?" asked the fox, putting her tail to her eyes, but peeping slyly out of them all the same. "I am dying of hunger," answered the wolf doggedly. "And you know," he added with a grin, "that charity begins at home." "Quite so," replied the fox. "It would be unreasonable of me to object to your satisfying your appetite at my expense. But if the fox resigns herself to the sacrifice, the mother offers you one last request." "Then be quick and don't waste my time, for I can't wait much longer. What is it you want?" "You must know," said the fox, "that in this village there is a rich man who makes in the summer enough cheeses to last him for the whole year, and keeps them in an old well, now dry, in his courtyard. By the well hang 2 buckets on a pole that were used in former days to draw up water. For many nights I have crept down to the palace and have lowered myself in the bucket, bringing home with me enough cheese to feed the children. All I beg of you is to come with me, and, instead of hunting chickens and such things, I will make a good meal off cheese before I die." "But the cheeses may be all finished by now?" "If you were only to see the quantities of them," laughed the fox, "and even if they were finished, there would always be me to eat." "Well, I will come. Lead the way. But I warn you that if you try to escape or play any tricks, you are reckoning without your host, that is to say, without my legs, which are as long as yours." All was silent in the village, and not a light was to be seen, but that of the moon, which shone bright and clear in the sky. The wolf and the fox crept softly along, when suddenly they stopped and looked at each other. A savory smell of frying bacon reached their noses and reached the noses of the sleeping dogs, who began to bark greedily. "Is it safe to go on, think you?" asked the wolf in a whisper, and the fox shook her head. "Not while the dogs are barking," said she. "Someone might come out to see if anything was the matter." And she signed to the wolf to curl himself up in the shadow beside her. In about half an hour, the dogs grew tired of barking, or perhaps the bacon was eaten up, and there was no smell to excite them. Then the wolf and the fox jumped up and hastened to the foot of the wall. "I am lighter than he is," thought the fox to herself, "and perhaps if I make haste I can get a start and jump over the wall on the other side before he manages to spring over this one." And she quickened her pace. But if the wolf could not run, he could jump, and with one bound he was beside his companion. "What were you going to do, comrade?" "Oh, nothing," replied the fox, much vexed at the failure of her plan. "I think if I were to take a bit out of your haunch, you would jump better," said the wolf, giving a snap at her as he spoke. The fox drew back uneasily. "Be careful, or I shall scream," she snarled. And the wolf, understanding all that might happen if the fox carried out her threat, gave a signal to his companion to leap on the wall, where he immediately followed her. Once on the top, they crouched down and looked about them. Not a creature was to be seen in the courtyard, and in the furthest corner from the house stood the well, with its 2 buckets suspended from a pole, just as the fox had described it. The 2 thieves dragged themselves noiselessly along the wall till they were opposite the well, and by stretching out her neck as far as it would go, the fox was able to make out that there was only very little water in the bottom, but just enough to reflect the moon, big and round and yellow. "How lucky!" cried she to the wolf. "There is a huge cheese about the size of a mill wheel. Look, look, did you ever see anything so beautiful?" "Never," answered the wolf, peering over in his turn, his eyes glistening greedily, for he imagined that the moon's reflection in the water was really a cheese. "And now, unbeliever, what have you to say?" And the fox laughed gently. "That you are a woman, I mean a fox, of your word," replied the wolf. "Well then, go down in that bucket and eat your fill," said the fox. "Oh, is that your game?" asked the wolf with a grin. "No, no, the person who goes down in the bucket will be you, and if you don't go down, your head will go without you." "Of course I will go down, with the greatest pleasure," answered the fox, who had expected the wolf's reply. "And be sure you don't eat all the cheese, or it will be the worse for you," continued the wolf. But the fox looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Farewell, suspicious one," she said sadly, and climbed into the bucket. In an instant, she had reached the bottom of the well and found that the water was not deep enough to cover her legs. "Why, it is larger and richer than I thought," cried she, turning towards the wolf, who was leaning over the wall of the well. "Then be quick and bring it up," commanded the wolf. "How can I, when it weighs more than I do?" asked the fox. "If it is so heavy, bring it in 2 bits, of course," said he. "But I have no knife," answered the fox. "You will have to come down yourself, and we will carry it up between us." "And how am I to come down?" inquired the wolf. "Oh, you are really very stupid. Get into the other bucket that is nearly over your head." The wolf looked up and saw the bucket hanging there, and with some difficulty he climbed into it. As he weighed at least 4 times as much as the fox, the bucket went down with a jerk, and the other bucket in which the fox was seated came to the surface. As soon as he understood what was happening, the wolf began to speak like an angry wolf, but was a little comforted when he remembered that the cheese still remained to him. "But where is the cheese?" he asked of the fox, who in her turn was leaning over the parapet watching his proceedings with a smile. "The cheese?" answered the fox. "Why, I am taking it home to my babies, who are too young to get food for themselves." "Ah, traitor!" cried the wolf, howling with rage. But the fox was not there to hear this insult, for she had gone off to a neighboring fowl house, where she had noticed some fat young chickens the day before. "Perhaps I did treat him rather badly," she said to herself. "But it seems getting cloudy, and if there should be heavy rain, the other bucket will fill and sink to the bottom, and his will go up. At least it may." How Ian Direach Got the Blue Falcon. From Cuentos Populares por Antonio de Trueba. Long ago, a king and queen ruled over the islands of the West, and they had one son, whom they loved dearly. The boy grew up to be tall and strong and handsome, and he could run and shoot and swim and dive better than any lad of his own age in the country. Besides, he knew how to sail about and sing songs to the harp, and during the winter evenings, when everyone was gathered round the huge hall fire shaping boughs or weaving cloth, Ian Direach would tell them tales of the deeds of his fathers. So the time slipped by till Ian was almost a man, as they reckoned men in those days. And then his mother the queen died. There was great mourning throughout all the isles, and the boy and his father mourned her bitterly also. But before the new year came, the king had married another wife and seemed to have forgotten his old one. Only Ian remembered. On a morning when the leaves were yellow in the trees of the glen, Ian slung his bow over his shoulder, and filling his quiver with arrows, went on to the hill in search of game. But not a bird was to be seen anywhere, till at length a blue falcon flew past him, and raising his bow, he took aim at her. His eye was straight and his hand steady, but the falcon's flight was swift, and he only shot a feather from her wing. As the sun was now low over the sea, he put the feather in his game bag and set out homewards. "Have you brought me much game today?" asked his stepmother as he entered the hall. "Naught save this," he answered, handing her the feather of the blue falcon, which she held by the tip and gazed at silently. Then she turned to Ian and said, "I am setting it on you as crosses and as spells, and as the fall of the year, that you may always be cold and wet and dirty, and that your shoes may ever have pools in them, till you bring me hither the blue falcon on which that feather grew." "If it is spells you are laying, I can lay them too," answered Ian Direach, "and you shall stand with one foot on the great house and another on the castle, till I come back again, and your face shall be to the wind from wheresoever it shall blow." Then he went away to seek the bird, as his stepmother bade him, and looking homewards from the hill, he saw the queen standing with one foot on the great house and the other on the castle, and her face turned towards whatever tempest should blow. On he journeyed, over hills and through rivers till he reached a wide plain, and never a glimpse did he catch of the falcon. Darker and darker it grew, and the small birds were seeking their nests, and at length Ian Direach could see no more, and he lay down under some bushes, and sleep came to him. And in his dream a soft nose touched him, and a warm body curled up beside him, and a low voice whispered to him, "Fortune is against you, Ian Direach. I have but the cheek and the hoof of a sheep to give you, and with these you must be content." With that, Direach awoke, and beheld Gila Mertine the fox. Between them they kindled a fire, and ate their supper. Then Gila Mertine the fox bade Direach lie down as before, and sleep till morning. And in the morning, when he awoke, Gila Mertine said, "The falcon that you seek is in the keeping of the giant of the 5 heads, and the 5 necks, and the 5 humps. I will show you the way to his house, and I counsel you to do his bidding, nimbly and cheerfully, and above all, to treat his birds kindly, for in this manner he may give you his falcon to feed and care for. And when this happens, wait till the giant is out of his house. Then throw a cloth over the falcon, and bear her away with you. Only see that not one of her feathers touches anything within the house, or evil will befall you." "I thank you for your counsel," spake Direach, "and I will be careful to follow it." Then he took the path to the giant's house. "Who is there?" cried the giant, as someone knocked loudly on the door of his house. "One who seeks work as a servant," answered Direach. "And what can you do?" asked the giant again. "I can feed birds and tend pigs. I can feed and milk a cow, and also goats and sheep, if you have any of these," replied Direach. "Then enter, for I have great need of such a one," said the giant. So Direach entered, and tended so well and carefully all the birds and beasts, that the giant was better satisfied than ever he had been, and at length he thought that he might even be trusted to feed the falcon. And the heart of was glad, and he tended the blue falcon till his father's shone like the sky. And the giant was well pleased, and one day he said to him, "For long my brothers on the other side of the mountain have besought me to visit them, but never could I go for fear of my falcon. Now, I think I can leave her with you for one day, and before nightfall I shall be back again." Scarcely was the giant out of sight next morning, when Direach seized the falcon, and throwing a cloth over her head, hastened with her to the door. But the rays of the sun pierced through the thickness of the cloth, and as they passed the doorpost, she gave a spring, and the tip of one of her feathers touched the post, which gave a scream and brought the giant back in 3 strides. Direach trembled as he saw him, but the giant only said, "If you wish for my falcon, you must first bring me the white sword of light that is in the house of the big women of Durad." "And where do they live?" asked But the giant answered, "Ah, that is for you to discover." And dared say no more, and hastened down to the waste. There, as he hoped, he met his friend Gila Mertine the fox, who bade him eat his supper and lie down to sleep. And when he had wakened next morning, the fox said to him, "Let us go down to the shore of the sea." And to the shore of the sea they went. And after they had reached the shore, and beheld the sea stretching before them, and the isle of Durad in the midst of it, the soul of sank, and he turned to Gila Mertine, and asked why he had brought him thither. For the giant, when he had sent him, had known full well that without a boat he could never find the big women. "Do not be cast down," answered the fox. "It is quite easy. I will change myself into a boat, and you shall go on board me, and I will carry you over the sea to the 7 big women of Durad. Tell them that you are skilled in brightening silver and gold, and in the end they will take you as servant. And if you are careful to please them, they will give you the white sword of light to make bright and shining. But when you seek to steal it, take heed that its sheath touches nothing inside the house, or ill will befall you." So Direach did all things as the fox had told him, and the 7 big women of Durad took him for their servant, and for 6 weeks he worked so hard that his 7 mistresses said to each other, "Never has a servant had the skill to make all bright and shining like this one. Let us give him the white sword of light to polish like the rest." Then they brought forth the white sword of light from the iron closet where it hung, and bade him rub it till he could see his face in the shining blade. And he did so. But one day, when the 7 big women were out of the way, he bethought him that the moment had come for him to carry off the sword, and, replacing it in its sheath, he hoisted it on his shoulder. But just as he was passing through the door, the tip of the sheath touched it, and the door gave a loud shriek. And the big women heard it, and came running back, and took the sword from him, and said, "If it is our sword you want, you must first bring us the bay colt of the king of Erin." Humbled and ashamed, Direach left the house, and sat by the side of the sea, and soon Gila Mertine, the fox, came to him. "Plainly I see that you have taken no heed to my words, Direach," spoke the fox. "But eat first, and yet once more will I help you." At these words the heart returned again to Direach, and he gathered sticks and made a fire, and ate with Gila Mertine the fox, and slept on the sand. At dawn next morning, Gila Mertine said to Direach, "I will change myself into a ship, and will bear you across the seas to Erin, to the land where dwells the king. And you shall offer yourself to serve in his stable, and to tend his horses, till at length so well content is he, that he gives you the bay colt to wash and brush. But when you run away with her, see that naught except the soles of her hooves touch anything within the palace gates, or it will go ill with you." After he had thus counseled Direach, the fox changed himself into a ship, and set sail for Erin. And the king of that country gave into Direach's hands the care of his horses, and never before did their skins shine so brightly, or was their pace so swift. And the king was well pleased, and at the end of a month he sent for Ian, and said to him, "You have given me faithful service, and now I will entrust you with the most precious thing that my kingdom holds." And when he had spoken, he led Direach to the stable, where stood the bay colt. And Ian rubbed her, and fed her, and galloped with her all round the country, till he could leave one wind behind him, and catch the other which was in front. "I am going away to hunt," said the king one morning, while he was watching Ian tend the bay colt in her stable. "The deer have come down from the hill, and it is time for me to give them chase." Then he went away, and when he was no longer in sight, Direach led the bay colt out of the stable, and sprang on her back. But as they rode through the gate, which stood between the palace and the outer world, the colt swished her tail against the post, which shrieked loudly. In a moment the king came running up, and he seized the colt's bridle. "If you want my bay colt, you must first bring me the daughter of the king of the Franks." With slow steps went Direach down to the shore, where Gila Mertine the fox awaited him. "Plainly I see that you have not done as I bid you, nor will you ever do it," spoke Gila Mertine the fox. "But I will help you yet again for a third time. I will change myself into a ship, and we will sail to France." And to France they sailed. And, as he was the ship, the Gila Mertine sailed where he would, and ran himself into the cleft of a rock, high onto the land. Then he commanded Direach to go up to the king's palace, saying that he had been wrecked, that his ship was made fast in a rock, and that none had been saved but himself only. Direach listened to the words of the fox, and he told a tale so pitiful that the king and queen and the princess their daughter all came out to hear it. And when they had heard, naught would please them except to go down to the shore and visit the ship, which by now was floating, for the tide was up. Torn and battered was she, as if she had passed through many dangers, yet music of a wondrous sweetness poured forth from within. "Bring hither a boat," cried the princess, "that I may go and see for myself the harp that gives forth such music." And a boat was brought, and Direach stepped in to row it to the side of the ship. To the further side he rowed, so that none could see, and when he helped the princess on board, he gave a push to the boat, so that she could not get back to it again. And the music sounded always sweeter, though they could never see whence it came, and sought it from one part of the vessel to another. When at last they reached the deck and looked around them, naught of land could they see, or anything save the rushing waters. The princess stood silent, and her face grew grim. At last she said, "An ill trick have you played me. What is this that you have done, and whither are we going?" "It is a queen you will be," answered Direach, "for the king of Erin has sent me for you, and in return he will give me his bay colt, that I may take him to the 7 big women of Durad, in exchange for the white sword of light. This I must carry to the giant of the 5 heads, and 5 necks, and 5 humps, and in place of it he will bestow on me the blue Falcon, which I have promised my stepmother, so that she may free me from the spell which she has laid on me." "I would rather be wife to you," answered the princess. By and by the ship sailed into a harbor on the coast of Erin, and cast anchor there. And Gila Mertine, the fox, bade Direach tell the princess that she must bide yet a while in a cave amongst the rocks, for they had business on land, and after a while they would return to her. Then they took a boat and rowed up to some rocks, and as they touched the land, Gila Mertine changed himself into a fair woman, who laughed and said to Direach, "I will give the king a fine wife." Now the king of Erin had been hunting on the hill, and when he saw a strange ship sailing towards the harbor, he guessed that it might be Direach, and left his hunting and ran down to the hill to the stable. Hastily he led the bay colt from his stall, and put the golden saddle on her back, and the silver bridle over his head, and with the colt's bridle in his hand, he hurried to meet the princess. "I have brought you the king of France's daughter," said Direach. And the king of Erin looked at the maiden, and was well pleased, not knowing that it was Gila Mertine the fox. And he bowed low, and besought her to do him the honor to enter the palace. And Gila Mertine, as he went in, turned to look back at Direach, and laughed. In the great hall the king paused and pointed to an iron chest which stood in a corner. "In that chest is the crown that has waited for you for many years," he said, "and at last you have come for it." And he stooped down to unlock the box. In an instant, Gila Mertine the fox had sprung on his back, and gave him such a bite that he fell down unconscious. Quickly the fox took his own shape again, and galloped away to the seashore, where Direach and the princess and the bay colt awaited him. "I will become a ship," cried Gila Mertine, "and you shall go on board me." And so he did, and Direach let the bay colt into the ship, and the princess went after them, and they set sail for Durad. The wind was behind them, and very soon they saw the rocks of Durad in front. Then spoke Gila-Mertian the fox, "Let the bay colt and the king's daughter hide in these rocks, and I will change myself into the colt and go with you to the house of the 7 big women." Joy filled the hearts of the big women when they beheld the bay colt led up to their door by Direach. And the youngest of them fetched the white sword of light and gave it into the hands of Direach, who took off the golden saddle and the silver bridle and went down the hill with the sword to the place where the princess and the real colt awaited him. "Now we shall have the ride that we have longed for," cried the 7 big women, and they saddled and bridled the colt, and the eldest one got upon the saddle. Then the second sister sat on the back of the first, and the third on the back of the second, and so on for the whole 7. And when they were all seated, the eldest struck her side with a whip, and the colt bounded forward. Over the moors she flew, and round the mountains, and still the big women clung to her and snorted with pleasure. At last she leapt high in the air, and came down on top of Monath the high hill, where the crag is. And she rested her 4 feet on the crag, and threw up her hind legs, and the 7 big women fell over the crag, and were dead when they reached the bottom. And the colt laughed, and became a fox again, and galloped away to the sea shore, where Direach and the princess and the real colt and the white sword of light were awaiting him. "I will make myself into a ship," said Gila-Mertian the fox, "and will carry you and the princess and the bay colt and the white sword of light back to the land." And when the shore was reached, Gila-Mertian the fox took back his own shape, and spoke to Direach in this wise, "Let the princess and the white sword of light and the bay colt remain among the rocks, and I will change myself into the likeness of the white sword of light, and you shall bear me to the giant, and instead he will give you the blue falcon." And Direach did as the fox bade him, and set out for the giant's castle. From afar the giant beheld the blaze of the white sword of light, and his heart rejoiced, and he took the blue falcon and put it in a basket, and gave it to Direach, who bore it swiftly away to the place where the princess and the bay colt and the real sword of light were awaiting him. So well content was the giant to possess the sword he had coveted for many a year, that he began at once to whirl it through the air and to cut and slash with it. For a little while, Gila-Mertian let the giant play with him in this manner. Then he turned in the giant's hand and cut through the 5 necks, so that the 5 heads rolled on the ground. Afterwards he went back to Direach and said to him, "Saddle the colt with the golden saddle, and bridle her with the silver bridle, and sling the basket with the falcon over your shoulders, and hold the white sword of light with its back against your nose. Then mount the colt, and let the princess mount behind you, and ride thus to your father's palace. But see that the back of the sword is ever against your nose, else when your stepmother beholds you, she will change you into a dry faggot. If, however, you do as I bid you, she will become herself a bundle of sticks." Direach hearkened to the words of Gila-Mertian, and his stepmother fell as a bundle of sticks before him, and he set fire to her, and was free from her spells forever. After that he married the princess, who was the best wife in all the islands of the west. Henceforth he was safe from harm, for had he not the bay colt, who could leave one wind behind her, and catch the other wind, and the blue falcon to bring him game to eat, and the white sword of light to pierce through his foes. And Direach knew that all this he owed to Gila-Mertian the fox, and he made a compact with him that he might choose any beast out of his herds whenever hunger seized him, and that henceforth no arrow should be let fly at him or at any of his race. But Gila Mertine the fox would take no reward for the help he had given to Direach, only his friendship. Thus all things prospered with Direach till he died. The Two Caskets, Hans Andersen. Far, far away, in the midst of a pine forest, there lived a woman who had both a daughter and a stepdaughter. Ever since her own daughter was born, the mother had given her all that she cried for, so she grew up to be as cross and disagreeable as she was ugly. Her stepsister, on the other hand, had spent her childhood in working hard to keep house for her father, who died soon after his second marriage, and she was as much beloved by the neighbors for her goodness and industry as she was for her beauty. As the years went on, the difference between the two girls grew more marked, and the old woman treated her stepdaughter worse than ever, and was always on the watch for some pretext for beating her or depriving her of her food. Anything, however foolish, was good enough for this. And one day, when she could think of nothing better, she set both the girls to spin while sitting on the low wall of the well. "And you had better mind what you do," said she, "for the one whose thread breaks first shall be thrown to the bottom." But of course she took good care that her own daughter's flax was fine and strong, while the stepsister had only some coarse stuff which no one would have thought of using. As might be expected, in a very little while the poor girl's thread snapped, and the old woman, who had been watching from behind a door, seized her stepdaughter by her shoulders and threw her into the well. "That is an end of you," she said. But she was wrong, for it was only the beginning. Down, down, down went the girl. It seemed as if the well must reach to the very middle of the earth, but at last her feet touched the ground, and she found herself in a field more beautiful than even the summer pastures of her native mountains. Trees waved in the soft breeze, and flowers of the brightest colors danced in the grass. And though she was quite alone, the girl's heart danced too, for she felt happier than she had since her father died. So she walked on through the meadow till she came to an old, tumble-down fence. So old that it was a wonder it managed to stand up at all, and it looked as if it depended for support on the old man's beard that climbed all over it. The girl paused for a moment as she came up, and gazed about for a place where she might safely cross. But before she could move, a voice cried from the fence, "Do not hurt me, little maiden. I am so old, I have not much longer to live." And the maiden answered, "No, I will not hurt you. Fear nothing." And then, seeing a spot where the clematis grew less thickly than in other places, she jumped lightly over. "May all go well with thee," said the fence as the girl walked on. She soon left the meadow and turned into a path which ran between two flowery hedges. Right in front of her stood an oven, and through its open door she could see a pile of white loaves. "Eat as many loaves as you like, but do me no harm, little maiden," cried the oven. And the maiden told her to fear nothing, for she never hurt anything, and was very grateful for the oven's kindness in giving her such a beautiful white loaf. When she had finished it, down to the last crumb, she shut the oven door and said, "Good morning." "May all go well with thee," said the oven as the girl walked on. By and by she became very thirsty, and seeing a cow with a milk pail hanging on her horn, turned towards her. "Milk me, and drink as much as you will, little maiden," cried the cow, "but be sure you spill none on the ground, and do me no harm, for I have never harmed anyone." "Nor I," answered the girl. "Fear nothing." So she sat down and milked till the pail was nearly full. Then she drank it all up except a little drop at the bottom. "Now throw any that is left over my hoofs, and hang the pail on my horns again," said the cow. And the girl did as she was bid, and kissed the cow on her forehead, and went her way. Many hours had now passed since the girl had fallen down the well, and the sun was setting. "Where shall I spend the night?" thought she. And suddenly she saw before her a gate which she had not noticed before, and a very old woman leaning against it. "Good evening," said the girl politely, and the old woman answered, "Good evening, my child. Would that everyone was as polite as you. Are you in search of anything?" "I am in search of a place," replied the girl. And the woman smiled and said, "Then stop a little while and comb my hair, and you shall tell me all the things you can do." "Willingly, mother," answered the girl. And she began combing out the old woman's hair, which was long and white. Half an hour passed in this way, and then the old woman said, "As you did not think yourself too good to comb me, I will show you where you may take service. Be prudent and patient, and all will go well." So the girl thanked her, and set out for a farm at a little distance, where she was engaged to milk the cows and sift the corn. As soon as it was light next morning, the girl got up and went into the cow house. "I'm sure you must be hungry," said she, patting each in turn. And then she fetched hay from the barn, and while they were eating it, she swept out the cow house and strewed clean straw upon the floor. The cows were so pleased with the care she took of them that they stood quite still while she milked them, and did not play any of the tricks on her that they had played on other dairy maids who were rough and rude. And when she had done, and was going to get up from her stool, she found sitting round her a whole circle of cats, black and white, tabby and tortoise shell, who all cried with one voice, "We are very thirsty. Please give us some milk." "My poor little pussies," said she, "of course you shall have some." And she went into the dairy, followed by all the cats, and gave each one a little red saucerful. But before they drank, they all rubbed themselves against her knees and purred by way of thanks. The next thing the girl had to do was to go to the storehouse and to sift the corn through a sieve. While she was busy rubbing the corn, she heard a whir of wings, and a flock of sparrows flew in at the window. "We are hungry. Give us some corn. Give us some corn," cried they. And the girl answered, "You poor little birds, of course you shall have some," and scattered a fine handful over the floor. When they had finished, they flew on her shoulders and flapped their wings by way of thanks. Time went by, and no cows in the whole countryside were so fat and well tended as hers, and no dairy had so much milk to show. The farmer's wife was so well satisfied that she gave her higher wages and treated her like her own daughter. At length, one day, the girl was bidden by her mistress to come into the kitchen, and when there, the old woman said to her, "I know you can tend cows and keep a diary. Now let me see what you can do besides. Take this sieve to the well and fill it with water, and bring it home to me without spilling one drop by the way." The girl's heart sank at this order, for how was it possible for her to do her mistress's bidding? However, she was silent, and taking the sieve, went down to the well with it. Stopping over the side, she filled it to the brim, but as soon as she lifted it, the water all ran out of the holes. Again and again she tried, but not a drop would remaining in the sieve, and she was just turning away in despair when a flock of sparrows flew down from the sky. "Ashes! Ashes!" they twittered, and the girl looked at them and said, "Well, I can't be in a worse plight than I am already, so I will take your advice." And she ran back to the kitchen and filled her sieve with ashes. Then once more she dipped the sieve into the well, and behold, this time not a drop of water disappeared. "Here is the sieve, mistress," cried the girl, going to the room where the old woman was sitting. "You are cleverer than I expected," answered she, "or else someone helped you who is skilled in magic." But the girl kept silence, and the old woman asked her no more questions. Many days passed during which the girl went about her work as usual, but at length one day the old woman called her and said, "I have something more for you to do. There are here 2 yarns, the one white, the other black. What you must do is to wash them in the river till the black one becomes white and the white black." And the girl took them to the river and washed hard for several hours, but wash as she would, they never changed one whit. "This is worse than the sieve," thought she, and was about to give up in despair, when there came a rush of wings through the air, and on every twig of the birch trees which grew by the bank was perched a sparrow. "The black to the east, the white to the west," they sang all at once, and the girl dried her tears and felt brave again. Picking up the black yarn, she stood facing the east and dipped it in the river, and in an instant it grew white as snow. Then turning to the west, she held the white yarn in the water, and it became as black as a crow's wing. She looked back at the sparrows and smiled and nodded to them, and flapping their wings in reply, they flew swiftly away. At the sight of the yarn, the old woman was struck dumb. But when at length she found her voice, she asked the girl what magician had helped her to do what no one had done before. But she got no answer, for the maiden was afraid of bringing trouble on her little friends. For many weeks, the mistress shut herself up in her room, and the girl went about her work as usual. She hoped that there was an end to the difficult tasks which had been set her. But in this she was mistaken. For one day the old woman appeared suddenly in the kitchen and said to her, "There is one more trial to which I must put you, and if you do not fail in that, you will be left in peace forevermore. Here are the yarns which you washed. Take them and weave them into a web that is as smooth as a king's robe, and see that it is spun by the time that the sun sets." "This is the easiest thing I have been set to do," thought the girl, who was a good spinner. But when she began, she found that the skein tangled and broke every moment. "Oh, I can never do it," she cried at last, and leaned her head against the loom and wept. But at that instant the door opened, and there entered, one behind another, a procession of cats. "What is the matter, fair maiden?" asked they, and the girl answered, "My mistress has given me this yarn to weave into a piece of cloth, which must be finished by sunset, and I have not even begun yet, for the yarn breaks whenever I touch it." "If that is all, dry your eyes," said the cats. "We will manage it for you." And they jumped on the loom and wove so fast and so skillfully that in a very short time the cloth was ready and was as fine as any king ever wore. The girl was so delighted at the sight of it that she gave each cat a kiss on his forehead as they left the room behind one the other as they had come. "Who has taught you this wisdom?" asked the old woman, after she had passed her hands twice or thrice over the cloth, and could find no roughness anywhere. But the girl only smiled and did not answer. She had learned early the value of silence. After a few weeks, the old woman sent for her maid and told her that as her year of service was now up, she was free to return home, but that for her part, the girl had served her so well that she hoped she might stay with her. But at these words the maid shook her head and answered gently, "I have been happy here, madam, and I thank you for your goodness to me. But I have left behind me a stepsister and a stepmother, and I am fain to be with them once more." The old woman looked at her for a moment, and then she said, "Well, that must be as you like, but as you have worked faithfully for me, I will give you a reward. Go now into the loft above the storehouse, and there you will find many caskets. Choose the one which pleases you best, but be careful not to open it till you have set it in the place where you wish it to remain." The girl left the room to go to the loft, and as soon as she got outside, she found all the cats waiting for her. Walking in procession, as was their custom, they followed her into the loft, which was filled with caskets big and little, plain and splendid. She lifted up one and looked at it, and then put it down to examine another, yet more beautiful. Which should she choose, the yellow or the blue, the red or the green, the gold or the silver? She hesitated long, and went first to one and then to another, when she heard the cats' voices calling, "Take the black, take the black." The words make her look round. She had seen no black casket, but as the cats continued their cry, she peered into several corners that had remained unnoticed, and at length discovered a little black box, so small and so black that it might easily have been passed over. "This is the casket that pleases me best, mistress," said the girl, carrying it into the house. And the old woman smiled and nodded and bade her go her way. So the girl set forth, after bidding farewell to the cows and the cats and the sparrows, who all wept as they said goodbye. She walked on and on and on, till she reached the flowery meadow. And there, suddenly, something happened. She never knew what, but she was sitting on the wall of the well in her stepmother's yard. Then she got up and entered the house. The woman and her daughter stared as if they had been turned into stone, but at length the stepmother gasped out, "So you are alive after all. Well, luck was ever against me. And where have you been this year past?" Then the girl told how she had taken service in the underworld, and, beside her wages, had brought home with her a little casket, which she would like to set up in her room. "Give me the money, and take the ugly little box off to the outhouse," cried the woman, beside herself with rage, and the girl, quite frightened at her violence, hastened away, with her precious box clasped to her bosom. The outhouse was in a very dirty state, as no one had been near it since the girl had fallen down the well, but she scrubbed and swept till everything was clean again, and then she placed the little casket on a small shelf in the corner. "Now I may open it," she said to herself, and unlocking it with the key which hung to its handle, she raised the lid, but started back as she did so, almost blinded by the light that burst upon her. No one would ever have guessed that that little black box could have held such a quantity of beautiful things. Rings, crowns, girdles, necklaces, all made of wonderful stones, and they shone with such brilliance that not only the stepmother and her daughter, but all the people round came running to see if the house was on fire. Of course, the woman felt quite ill with greed and envy, and she would have certainly taken all the jewels for herself had she not feared the wrath of the neighbors, who loved her stepdaughter as much as they hated her. But if she could not steal the casket and its contents for herself, at least she could get another like it, and perhaps a still richer one. So she bade her own daughter sit on the edge of the well and threw her into the water exactly as she had done to the other girl. And exactly as before, the flowery meadow lay at the bottom. Every inch of the way she trod the path which her stepsister had trodden, and saw the things which she had seen. But there the likeness ended. When the fence prayed her to do it no harm, she laughed rudely and tore up some of the stakes so that she might get over the more easily. When the oven offered her bread, she scattered the loaves onto the ground and stamped on them. And after she had milked the cow and drunk as much as she wanted, she threw the rest on the grass and kicked the pail to bits, and never heard them say as they looked after her, "You shall not have done this to me for nothing." Towards evening, she reached the spot where the old woman was leaning against the gate post, but she passed her by without a word. "Have you no manners in your country?" asked the crone. "I can't stop and talk. I am in a hurry," answered the girl. "It is getting late, and I have to find a place." "Stop and comb my hair for a little," said the old woman, "and I will help you to get a place." "Comb your hair, indeed. I have something better to do than that." And slamming the gate in the crone's face, she went her way. And she never heard the words that followed her. "You shall not have done this to me for nothing." By and by the girl arrived at the farm, and she was engaged to look after the cows and sift the corn, as her stepsister had been. But it was only when someone was watching her that she did her work. At other times the cow house was dirty, and the cows ill-fed and beaten, so that they kicked over the pail and tried to butt her. And everyone said they had never seen such thin cows or such poor milk. As for the cats, she chased them away and ill-treated them, so that they had not even the spirit to chase the rats and mice, which nowadays ran about everywhere. And when the sparrows came to beg for some corn, they fared no better than the cows and the cats, for the girl threw her shoes at them, till they flew in a fright to the woods and took shelter amongst the trees. Months passed in this manner, when, one day, the mistress called the girl to her. "All that I have given you to do, you have done ill," said she, "yet will I give you another chance. For though you cannot tend cows, or divide the grain from the chaff, there may be other things that you can do better. Therefore, take this sieve to the well, and fill it with water, and see that you bring it back without spilling a drop." The girl took the sieve and carried it to the well as her sister had done, but no little birds came to help her, and after dipping it in the well 2 or 3 times, she brought it back empty. "I thought as much," said the old woman angrily. "She that is useless in one thing is useless in another." Perhaps the mistress may have thought that the girl had learnt a lesson, but if she did, she was quite mistaken, as the work was no better done than before. By and by she sent for her again, and gave her maid the black and white yarn to wash in the river. But there was no one to tell her the secret by which the black would turn white and the white black, so she brought them back as they were. This time the old woman only looked at her grimly, but the girl was too well pleased with herself to care what anyone thought about her. After some weeks, her third trial came, and the yarn was given her to spin, as it had been given to her stepsister before her. But no procession of cats entered the room to weave a web of fine cloth, and at sunset she only brought back to her mistress an armful of dirty, tangled wool. "There seems nothing in the world you can do," said the old woman, and left her to herself. Soon after this, the year was up, and the girl went to her mistress to tell her that she wished to go home. "Little desire have I to keep you," answered the old woman, "for no one thing have you done as you ought. Still, I will give you some payment. Therefore go up into the loft, and choose for yourself one of the caskets that lies there. But see that you do not open it till you place it where you wish it to stay." This was what the girl had been hoping for, and so rejoiced was she that, without even stopping to thank the old woman, she ran as fast as she could to the loft. There were the caskets, blue and red, green and yellow, silver and gold, and there in the corner stood a little black casket, just like the one her stepsister had brought home. "If there are so many jewels in that little black thing, this big red one will hold twice the number," she said to herself, and snatching it up, she set off on her road home without even going to bid farewell to her mistress. "See, mother, see what I have brought," cried she, as she entered the cottage holding the casket in both hands. "Ah, you have got something very different from that little black box," answered the old woman with delight. But the girl was so busy finding a place for it to stand that she took little notice of her mother. "It will look best here. No, here," she said, setting it first on one piece of furniture, and then on another. "No, after all it is to find to live in a kitchen, let us place it in the guest chamber." So, mother and daughter carried it proudly upstairs and put it on a shelf over the fireplace. Then, untying the key from the handle, they opened the box. As before, a bright light leapt out directly the lid was raised, but it did not spring from the luster of jewels, but from hot flames, which darted along the walls and burnt up the cottage and all that was in it, and the mother and daughter as well. As they had done when the stepdaughter came home, the neighbors all hurried to see what was the matter. But they were too late. Only the hen house was left standing, and, in spite of her riches, there the stepdaughter lived happily to the end of her days.